Todd Schneider. Welcome to another episode of Water Tech with Todd. In this episode, we're going to be going over the ACV, or the automatic control valve. Now, when we're talking about the ACV, we're going to be going over the Watts LF-F115 and the Watts LF-M115. Two different models, but the similarities are so close and the operations are so close, we'll be able to knock both these valves out in one episode, explaining how they work, all the different components, and then also getting down to how to adjust that pressure. So, okay, when going over one of these ACV valves, I want to go over some of the key components, some of the key parts that play in the factor of how we are taking our pressure from high pressure and bringing it down to low. The first part you want to know about is this is going to be our body. Okay, now the body doesn't do a lot except hold that diaphragm, and we'll go over how that works. The other key component is going to be our fixed orifice. Okay, this is probably one of the most overlooked items on the ACV, and we'll again explain how that one works. Also, this is going to be the brains of the operation. This is going to be our pilot valve. The last part we're going to be going over here is going to be our flow control, all right, and how we're going to adjust that to take water on and off that valve. So let's talk about the body of this valve. What's going on with this valve is we are actually having water enter through this side of the ACV, and it's dropping down to the bottom of the valve and flowing up through a seat and traveling down the actual piping itself. But inside that valve, what we're going to have is a diaphragm. Okay, water will be flowing up, raising the diaphragm up, allowing water to pass through. But then with all of our other key components, we'll be putting water back on top of this diaphragm, pushing the valve in that closed position. Now, one thing with this valve here is the body is not the smart. It just holds everything together. Okay, so let's go over how does this valve actually operate. What's happening is we have full incoming pressure. Okay, now what is going on is water is actually going to be flowing up through this tube, up over through our fixed orifice, traveling up through our T and splitting. Half the water is going to be going on top of this diaphragm, pressing it in the closed position. The rest will be dropping down this tube and stopping at our control valve. So let's jump into some of these key components. And I'm going to go right to the pilot valve. This is the brains of the operation. As we spoke about before, water is traveling down and stopping here. This is where we're going to make our adjustments. These are normally set right about 50 psi. And when the downstream goes below that 50 psi, this valve is going to open, allowing water to pass through. So as it's passing through, what we're doing is we're actually taking water off the top of the valve, raising the diaphragm, allowing water to pass to the downstream. As this pilot valve is satisfied to the set pressure, it will not allow any more water to go through it, allowing more water to come back on top and pushing the diaphragm down and closing the valve off. Okay, so let's look at the next key component. And this component is one of the most overlooked components of this device, but it's so important. And that's going to be this fixed orifice. Okay, we're allowing water to come through this orifice, come up and feed in both directions. But because we're taking water off the valve and adding water onto the valve, we have to be able to reduce the flow, and that's where it's happening here, which in turn is allowing more water to come off the valve than it does to come on the valve. Okay, so here is the orifice actually disconnected, and what you'll see is that this is red for a reason, and it's showing that you can't just change this out to a standard brass 90, because inside there is you're going to see that small orifice that's slowing down that water flow going onto the valve. We'll actually be able to remove it, take a look at it. You'll notice just a small hole. Okay, the next component I want to jump into is going to be our speed control. This is going to allow us to control how fast we bring water off the valve or how slow we want to bring it off. What we want to do is we're going to turn this off. Now, I like to start with this speed control, turning it in all the way clockwise or in the closed position. And then what I'll do when I'm starting this up, I like to back it out about 1.5 to 2 turns as an approximate setting, and then we'll dial that in based on how we want this valve to control itself. Okay, so now that we've gone over all the key components of this valve, the body, the fixed orifice, the pilot valve, and our speed control, let's go back over how all of these components working together are going to take our high pressure on this side of the valve and bring it to our reduced pressure on the downstream side. Okay, so now that we've talked about all those key components, our pilot, our fixed orifice, our speed control, the body, and the diaphragm, let's put it all together and show how this thing's going to work. So what we're going to have on this side of the valve is we're going to have full pressure coming in, entering through the valve, coming through our tubing system over to our fixed orifice. Now for easy numbers, let's say we have 100 gallons a minute coming up, hitting our fixed orifice, and it's going to be dropping it down to 25 gallons a minute, coming up, splitting, going to our pilot valve, going over to our main valve, closing that off. The reason we're doing that is we have to be able to take water off this valve a lot quicker than we put it on. When we're doing that, is we're doing this all through our pilot valve. Now, in order to adjust this pilot valve, we're going to want to make sure we get a downstream pressure, or we want to get our downstream flow going. Once we get our downstream flow going, we're going to loosen up our lock nut, and we're going to turn our control pin here in to increase, and then out to decrease. Now, when we are doing this, we need that flow downstream, and we only want to adjust this about 1 to 1.5 turns to increase that pressure, okay? Okay, so now let's get in. We've talked about the operations. Let's get into the speed control, why we have it here. Now, as you talked about in the beginning, we set this in the fully closed position, backed it out about 1.5 to 2 turns, just to kind of line us up where we need to be. Now, if you close this in, or clockwise spinning this in, it's going to slow the water coming off the valve. If you want to speed up the process, we want to back it out a little bit more, and that's going to speed up how fast we close this valve. Now remember, if you open it all the way up and you close this valve extremely fast, you may run into some water hammer, but if it's closed too much and you saw it way down, by the time the pilot valve reads that we need to close, what's happening is it's already still allowing too much water to go through. So a good key to hit is turn this all the way in, back it out about 1.5 to 2 turns, and then slowly adjust your speed either in or out based on the needs. Okay, we've gone over everything on our Watts LF-F115, but remember, if you're using that Watts LF-M115, you're going to notice that everything is the exact same. We still have our fixed orifice, our speed control, our main valve with the diaphragm. The only thing that's going to be slightly different is the actual pilot valve itself, but it all operates and works the exact same way. The startup process the exact same way as well. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you got any additional questions or comments, please put those in the comment sections below. If you happen to be in that Indiana, Kentucky, or Ohio market, reach out to us. We have these valves in our wet lab, fully function, where you can come in and actually take these apart, adjust them in a nice controlled environment before you go out on that project. As I ask always, please like and subscribe to my videos so I can do a lot more of these, and have a great day.